elevate. You're stacking up losses, I'm handing them out, yeah, I had to go delegate. It feel like I'm floating, I'm lost in the moment, that's why I couldn't levitate. They never believed that I would really fly, I had to go demonstrate. I had to set them straight. When you elevate, you're stacking up losses, I'm handing.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Cafe podcast. It's your host, Devin, as always, and we're here to make sure that we give you some tips, some tricks to help you on your personal journey. And one of the best ways that we know how to do that is through other people's stories and their journeys, what they've overcome, and the lessons they've learned, right? And through their lessons, you can take some knowledge in that and overcome battles or overcome obstacles you have in your own journey, or maybe you will have in your own journey. So today we actually have a special guest. We got Clay Smeltzer with us. He is the owner of CS Health Systems, and he focuses on, and with his company, they focus on basically busy parents and with nutrition and everything and getting you back to your optimum and your primal state. So thank you so much, Clay, for coming on with us today. How's everything going?
Hey, Devin, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it because it's cool. I like to chat about this stuff. I'll geek out on it, and it's pretty fun. But I love what you said to start off with here is because everybody's journey is different. And the one thing I love about humanity is that everybody's different. And I don't think in this world we celebrate that enough. And we talk about trying to shove everybody. And I come from the educational background, so I've been a teacher for 20 years as well. And we try to shove everybody in the same box. So hearing everybody's story allows us to pick up things that we can utilize. And some things, it's like the shopping cart. We don't go get everything from the grocery store. We take off the shelves what we need. And everybody's journey is different, so we can take that and we can relate to that. And I think that's one of the biggest things, especially as parents, and we deal with parents. It's like there's no blueprint, and there's no blueprint for life. So we're like, all right, how do we figure this thing out? So I love that intro because that's so, and your guest and people who are listening, make sure you do that. Make sure you listen to the episodes because that's important. Other people's journeys are so important to your journey.
No, I agree. Like one of the things that I always say when, because I have a mentor for my franchise business. I've had mentors, when becoming a personal trainer, all those different things, right? And people sometimes will think they're too good for a mentor or think they're too good for a coach. Realize that having that humility and having that sense of knowing that you don't know everything or might be able to learn something from someone else's journey, it's one of those things where me personally, I value time. And when I say that, most people immediately go to the fact that, oh, you just, want, to be kicking it on the beach with your feet up. No, I value time in the sense of you've already gone through this journey. You've already spent the time finding out the knowledge that I need. Why am I going to spend months, years trying to figure out the same thing when I can figure it out in days, weeks with you, right?
Yep.
So it just makes sense in that. So, that's awesome. And I love what you're doing and focusing on busy parents because us being parents and everything, like we know that life gets crazy and sometimes you tend to neglect yourself. So I want to start off, how did you get started in the personal development space, as well as what made you decide to focus on busy parents?
Yeah, well, you just said it. Sometimes we neglect ourselves, but I'm going to change that. It's not sometimes. It's 98% of the time we neglect ourselves as parents. Because think about it. We were taught, like I grew up in Pennsylvania. It's blue collar, work your butt off, shut up, do what you're supposed to, and then life will be great. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that didn't work out. I'm like, I did that. And it's like, at 35, I'm 43 right now. At 35, I'm sitting on my couch having a panic attack over a TV show. And I'm like, this isn't what life was supposed to be like. Like I followed the rules. I did the things. And now I'm sitting here like looking at my life being like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why? Like, am I crazy? Like, what the heck is going on? We have 3 kids. I'm married, like my wife. It's all like that. What's going on and how do I want my life to be like? But I wasn't taking care of myself. And I always say this way, we were taught to give to everybody else. But when I gave to everybody else, I was giving nothing to myself. And when we give nothing to ourselves as parents, we're not the best parent. We're not even the best for ourselves. And that's where it's like, hey, this year, my word is prioritize. And my goal is to help parents prioritize themselves first. So many people are like, well, that's selfish to put you first. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, it's selfish to not put me first, because when I don't put me first, my kids suffer because of it. Because think about how much confidence I have. Nope, it's lower. I don't take care of my health, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, you're stick skinny with a dad belly. I'm sitting there going, dude, you look like crap. Well, guess what that does? It resonates. My kids know I felt like crap. My kids right now know I feel great. Why? Because they're seeing me put the work in. They're seeing my body change. They're seeing my confidence change. They're seeing me stand up straight, my chest out, be like, yeah. I look in the mirror, I'm like, dang, dude, you look pretty good. Like, nice job. So I earned it. When we earn things and collect those wins, we feel more confident. Well, that resonates way better with my kids. Think about what my kids are seeing now versus panic attack over a TV show guy. Like, it's totally different. But I gave everything to everybody else. And I'm a teacher. I've been educated or in education for 20 years. I was taught to give to every kid. I was taught as from my parents to give to your kids. I was taught to give to everybody else. I was taught to give everything to my wife. And that left me with nothing. But ultimately, I was choosing that. I just had to choose different now.
No, that's huge. And I totally agree and resonate with that. It's one of those things where people will say it's selfish if you focus on yourself, right? But they say, and I totally agree with and align with it, is like you have to be, to a degree, selfish to be selfless, right?
Yes. Yep.
Because if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not filling your own cup, you can't continuously pour into other people's cups.
No.
Right? And
here's I want to stop you there. I apologize for stopping you, but
are you good?
I'll lose it. My ADHD will jump onto something else. I'll squirrel out somewhere else. But here's you're talking about the cup. You're talking about filling your cup. You're talking about giving. Here's the problem that we have. We were taught to give from our cup. So let's say you're doing what you need to do health wise. Your nutrition, your movement, you're intaking water great. You're getting good sleep. Your mindset's good. When you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning, is your cup actually full? If you're doing all 5 of those things, probably. But then let's say you wake up and you're like, you roll over, you give your wife a kiss, you gave from your cup. You go into the bathroom, you get your kids ready for school, whatever it is. You give to your wife in the morning, you give to your kids in the morning. And what happens to your level in your cup? It goes down. Then I go to school, or you go to your job. I have 110 students. I give to those 110 students, boom, it goes down. I give to the other teachers, boom, it goes down. So when I come back home to my family, how much is left in my cup? Probably like 15%, 10, 15%. So my family gets 10%. And the rest of my day at work, they got more percentage of me. Students who I don't even know, I don't raise them, I just teach them math. They got more percentage of me than what my own family did. So what we do is we're taught to give from your cup. The problem is nobody should be giving from, you shouldn't give from your cup, and you shouldn't let people put in your cup. What is in there is in yours. Think about it this way. If you got to the point where you ate right, you exercised, you had your water, you had the right mindset, you slept great, you had those 5 things intact, and you were like, boom, 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 boom. You're on point every day. Think about your cup being overflowing instead of just diminishing and refill. But think about it. I just think about this as we're going. Diminish, refill, diminish. How tiring is that? Dude, that's exhausting, trying to refill your cup. But what if you have it overflowing? How much water do you need to keep your cup overflowing? You don't need much, just a little tiny bit. But think about it. If you have the overflow, nobody puts in your cup, nobody takes out of your cup. When I wake up and I give to my wife in the morning, she can only have and taste my overflow. That's it. She doesn't get to put in. She doesn't get to, I love my wife, but she doesn't tell me who I am. She doesn't put in my cup. She doesn't take out of my cup. But she can drink as much overflow as she wants. Let's go to my kids. They get the overflow. How much overflow can all 3 of my kids have? As much as they want. Go to my 110 students. How much overflow can they take? As much as they want. There's no limitation to that. When I come back home to my family, how much of me does my family have? 100%, because they still get the overflow. If I overflow me first and I take care of me first, that means my family gets the overflow and they can drink as much. If I don't, I'm diminishing my cup. When I diminish my cup, how much can they get of me? Less than what they should. And that's where it's like, for me, I had to jump in on the cup, because that right there is just, how can we get parents to overflow? And if you're not a parent, how can we get you to overflow? Because it extends out to everybody around you. So that's how can we overflow the cup?
No, exactly. I agree with that. And I think I worded it wrong. I am in alignment with what you're saying on that.
Mhm.
When I was saying, giving from your cup, I do also mean from like the overflow. I don't think it should be a linear thing where you are giving, trying to then take in. I think that you filling your cup, right, should be a 24/7 thing, right?
Yeah.
So when I say giving from your cup, what I essentially refer to, I know I should have clarified, is that same overflow process, right? And when you're filling your own cup, or the process of your cup overflowing, people need to realize, at least in my opinion, that it's not others, like you said, putting anything into your cup.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly putting stuff into your own cup, from the conversations that you have, the perspective that you have in your day, the conversations, the things you listen to, the things you read, the things you do, right? All those things should be constantly just filling your cup up, and which leads to that overflow. One analogy from that, like to kind of like add to what you're saying, I interviewed Justin Prince last week, and one of his methods one of his formulas coming from the math, scene, for you, it's E plus R equals O.
I love it. Yep.
Right. So event plus response equals outcome.
Absolutely.
And so you can't necessarily always change the events in your life, the interactions that you have in your life, but your response to those events, the way you think about it, the way you, respond verbally to it, the way you, anything, you have control over that. And that is your own emotional maturity. Now, that dictates your outcome. So you can have either positive outcomes or negative outcomes all day long. But what you have to think of is kind of going into that overflow state. Every outcome is an event for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for your family, for your kids, what events, what inchangeable variables are you putting into their day, their life, that you have control over, which is your overflow? Would you kind of agree with that?
100%. Go to your health. We willingly and unwillingly, knowingly and unknowingly teach our kids everything. Because think about it. Well, none of us were born knowing anything besides like, hey, get something in my hand, squeeze, and then breathe, and then shove it in my mouth. That's it. That's all we knew. Everything else is learned. So as parents, if you are doing the action, you're teaching them. If you're not doing the action, you're also teaching them. So as I sat on a couch and ate tasty cakes and cookies and felt like tasty cakes and cookies, whether I told my kids I didn't feel good about myself or not, they already knew it. I didn't have to tell them. Like, and there were probably 6, 13, 10 in there, in that range there. So from 6 to 13, like in those range, they still knew. They still knew dad wasn't like excited about life. They still knew that. Like, he's moping around. He doesn't feel this. He feels anxious all the time. He's like, so he's irritable, all those things. But when I started taking care of my health, they're like, oh, dang, dad, okay, what's going on here? Okay, what's going on? Like, those are the things. Like, our son asked about, hey, how can I get some good protein in? We didn't sit here and say, you have to get protein in. He just knows we're looking for protein first. So he adopts those things, but he also adopts the bad things too. So, and that's what we got to understand, is that those good and bad, whether you do it or don't do it, you're the one teaching them. And what can you control? Like, I love that the E plus R equals O, because one of our members a while ago, that he said that, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. Like, I love it, because it is. Your response is in total control of you. So do you have that response that's an emotionally reactive response or a thought reactive response? And when you have if you're emotionally reactive, it's probably not doing what you wanted to do. So that response to, hey, I don't like what I see in a mirror. Well, what do you do? That's an event in your life. I look in the mirror. Do I like what I see? Yeah. All right, cool. What's the response to that? I can have an emotional response, be like, yeah, I made it. I got it. And then not do anything. Like, hey, I won. Well, cool. Are you going to keep winning? Or a thought reacting, going, man, I love what I see, Okay, what's going great? All right, here's what's going great. And I call this the ARA sequence: assess, reflect, and adjust. What's going right? What's going wrong? Why is it going right? Why is it going wrong? And what can I adjust? And lots of time in that sequence, we don't teach enough. And as education doesn't teach enough of what are you doing right? We always focus on what are we doing wrong. Well, what are you doing right? You should repeat those things. So we should focus on, hey, what am I taking out here? That's awesome. And let's keep repeating those things. What's written wrong? Okay, is it a detriment that's high enough level for me to actually take action on it? Or does it not really affect this? And it's like, some is like, but some are like, oh, yeah. Like, that's a bad thing. Like, okay, let's adjust these things. But most of the time it should be, hey, what am I in that R? What am I doing right? So we can keep getting the outcome, the O, to what we want that moves us towards our goals, our dreams, our aspirations, being the example as a good parent in there. But it all ultimately, it all comes back to you. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not, your kids are the reason why your kids are the way they are is because of you. That's totally, anybody can argue with me on that, but it comes back to you. Your kids act that way because of you.
Yeah, I mean, someone can argue it, but it's not really an argument. Then it's more of them just trying to defend the fact that either they fucked up or, they're not doing the things they need to do, which typically when people do that, they shift the blame because they don't want to take responsibility for the actions or inactions of themselves, right? And I think it's huge, like what you're saying too, with your kids, like you said, whether you do the things or don't do the things, you are leading by example, right?
It's you.
And your kids, yes, will love you no matter what.
Yep.
But are you the role model your kids are following?
Yeah.
Right? Because you might be, they'll love you, but are they really following you and seeing you as a role model? Right? I mean, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and it's funny that you you're saying the things about, your kids at the age ranges, because like what I noticed the other day, actually, I was drinking a protein shake and she didn't want her little kid breakfast, and she wanted a shake. So I had to make her like a mini little protein smoothie, and she wanted it done how she saw me do it.
Yeah.
So
think about that situation right there. She's 2. Cognitively, has the brain functions and the brain development. Does she know enough to be like, hey, that's great for my body and it's going to make me healthier? No. She's just like, Dad, I want to do what you do, man. I love you, Dad. Like, I love you that much. I just want to do what you do. And that doesn't stop. That continues subconsciously as we go on. Now, as they create patterns of thought, there'll be like later on when she starts to hit 8 years old, that's when cognitive function comes in that says, hey, why? Why am I doing this? What is this for? Then that's where the awesome part of being a dad comes in and a mom comes in. Now you can teach those things. Like, Kale's like, why do I need protein? I was like, okay, here's what it does for our body. Oh, really? Like it can give me big muscles. I'm like, yeah, like it's awesome. And so it's all those different teaching moments because you were the example. The opposite of that is all of those teaching, all of those frustrations you have because you want your kids to do a certain thing, but you're not doing it. And this is a quote I love. It was so impactful because the one thing you said, you have to be selfish in order to be selfless. I heard that when I was 28 by mentors I so respected and were super high level, and I still respect to this day. But I'm like, what does it even mean? I'm like, that sounds great, but I'm like, whatever. Okay, cool, awesome. Until I got to that point where I had to be, and I'm like, oh, now I get it. But the other quote I love the most too is this. It says, what you do speak so loudly that what you say, I can't hear. And it always resonates with me to say, all right, it doesn't matter what I say. Hey, go brush your teeth. If I'm not brushing my teeth, my kids ain't. Whether they see it or not, they're going to be like, Dad, dude, you have stinky breath, man. Your teeth look all yellow. You ain't brushing your teeth. Like, if I say, hey, we need to be healthy, and I don't be healthy, then, hey, you need to eat better. But I'm sitting there shoving a bag of chips down my throat. Like, okay, I can't tell my kids to eat better when I'm not doing it myself. So we have to make sure that every action we take is an action that we eventually want our kids to do. And if not, what we say doesn't really matter. Hey, when we're talking about, especially this age with kids growing up with these phones, with everything else, being in education, I see so much mental health has dropped. Kids are more anxious. Kids are more depressed. Kids are more this. One of the reasons is because we don't push them hard enough. Well, we don't want to make them feel bad. Well, sometimes we're going to have to feel bad. We got to push them. we can't take, I call it the happy kid phenomena. Parents want their kids to be happy. The problem is they take everything away for them to go through struggle. And you can't grow if there's no resistance. So when you parent takes away all of that resistance, you're setting your kid up for immense failure. So when we look at this, we have to be able to be there for them and show that. As a parent, if you're not communicating with your kids, hey, here's where I'm struggling with. How are they going to communicate how they feel? We just had a conversation with our son and our daughter. Our oldest is at college. Oh my God, I can't believe I got an adult. I'm like, oh my gosh. But she's awesome. She's super independent. She's like this go-getter. Like, she's awesome. But like our daughters, she had the opportunity to get her driver's license last week, but she didn't. So she didn't do the things that she needed to be able to be ready for it. So we had to have a conversation about taking initiative. She wanted a job, but did you actually really go after getting a job, or did we go back? So there's that part where, like, hey, we gave you the opportunity to be able to do so, but now as parents, it is our role and our job. Now it's our time to make sure that you do these things. So we're giving you the opportunity. You didn't take advantage of the opportunity. Now we need to look at, hey, what does initiative look like? We need to be an action taker, not a sit backer. So that's what we got to do. Our son, he shuts down when there's questions coming at him, and it's like he just freezes, and it's like, now we're trying to have an actual conversation with you. So we had that situation this week where he just froze and wouldn't talk. Well, obviously, as parents, we emotionally react. We go like, I just want you to say, or it just gets, I don't know. He's 11. So he's like, I don't know. So some of the things, like, you're just saying just to say because you don't know what to say. Like, okay, cool. But we had to have that tough conversation with him. And then we sat down like, listen, you need to have a conversation that's open and honest, and you need to be able to express your feelings. You are feeling something. You are thinking something. Therefore, you need to be able to learn how to communicate those. We're here for that, but you need to have this tough, uncomfortable conversation because what happened previously wasn't okay. And this conversation needs to happen so we can move through this, and that you can learn too, and we can learn how to communicate with you better, but also you learn how to communicate with us better so that we can actually have this dialogue and we can look at the situation, know what it is. Hey, is there an issue? Is there not an issue? But then we can move forward to it. Again, there's an event. The response was he shut down. The outcome was the situation wasn't solved, and we were pissed as parents. So now, okay, what's the new event? Well, the new event is how can we teach our son to communicate effectively? Okay, I had to have a tough conversation with him and say, listen, like, you can't do that. This is how we need to move forward. This is how I have to move forward. You have to move forward. And as men, we have to operate this way. And then we have the new event, which was the conversation, which then the response from everybody was awesome. And then afterwards, the day after, I think it was yesterday, he said to my wife, he's like, I'm really glad we had that conversation. I feel better because I was able to communicate to you like how I actually felt. And some of it was tough. Some of it was like, as parents, we're like, oh, damn, okay. Well, sorry it made you feel that way. You know what I mean? Like, and other ones were like, oh, okay, that's more understanding. Like, hey, and he's like, hey, sorry for this as well. So there's a lot of things going on there, but we have to be the example of having those things. And sometimes we have to be the tough. If we just took it away, like, okay, buddy, it's okay. You feel, and I hate to talk in that voice, but that's what I feel like it is, it's like, hey, like, if, I know you're feeling sad or upset, so just, it's okay. And then give him all the rewards that we didn't teach him anything. I told him that he can do what he wants and still get the reward, but you can't. You don't earn going to a basketball game with your friends if you can't have a conversation just because we wouldn't have a conversation. You don't get that, so it's like, some people are like, I do an initiation process with him. So every 2 years we go on a camping trip, and I've explained it to like what he does. So he has to complete 3 tasks. So his 12 coming up here. So he's going to do another one. And I'm like, if he doesn't complete the 3 tasks, he doesn't get the reward. And I have other people who are like, so really, like, if you wouldn't give it to him? I'm like, no. They're like, that's mean. I'm like, why? He didn't earn it. I'm like, you have to complete all 3 tasks. If you complete all 3 tasks, you're good. If you don't, we don't. He has to learn that sometimes if he fails, he doesn't get the reward. And they're like, oh, well, that's harsh. And I'm like, I'm okay with that.
No,
So
that's huge.
it's the example you set because you set it for yourself. I can't ask my kids to do things I'm not willing to do myself. Just like with my clients, I can't do a workout. I can't assign them a workout phase or a nutrition phase that I'm not willing to do myself, because now I'll be just being hypocritical. Like, hey, do this, but I'm not willing to do myself. Nah, come on, like you can't do that. Same thing with your kids. You're not willing to do it yourself. Don't expect your kids to do it, because they're going to do what you do, not what you say.
No, 100%. And I think that's huge and I commend you for doing that. If you don't complete the task, like even if you tried your hardest, if the task didn't get done, I'm sorry about it, but it is what it is. This is how life works. Sometimes you try your hardest and it just doesn't work out.
Yep.
It's a huge learning lesson that I don't think enough parents realize the detriment you're setting for your kid if you only reward them off of effort and not sometimes taking into consideration, like it has to be about they did this, they completed this, so here is the reward, or here is the outcome. The outcome, sometimes if you don't complete it, no matter how hard or you tried or how bad you wanted it, it just doesn't work out. Like, but you can try again, like and so forth, right? So I think that's huge. But I do want to rewind real quick to what you were saying about your kids. They hear you, they'll listen to you, but the more important thing is they're watching you, right? Your actions speak louder than your words. And it's funny because this isn't like a good example, but it was a funny example and it just reminded me of it. But there was I think it was like an Instagram post or a little Instagram reel. This mom was in the drive-through of, I think it was like Starbucks, and she was ordering a coffee. And the little kid, she must have been like 5, 6, she was facing forward in the car seat. And she was like, "Mom, can I get cookies?" And the mom looks back at her and she's like, "We have cookies at home." And the little kid goes, "We have coffee at home." And then the mom turns and she's like, "Can we order some cookies?" So it's one of those things where like your kids are smart, right? Yeah. So your actions, and even though you'll tell them no or whatever, if they see you contradicting what you're actually saying, they're not going to believe what you say. They're going to watch what you do, right? Yep. So, I just wanted to touch back on that, but I do want to ask you a question. I'm curious. With you being a teacher, right? What grade do you teach?
I teach middle school, so 7th and 8th grade. I teach 7th and 8th grade math. Everybody's favorite subject. You know that.
Actually, I actually liked math in middle school, high school. But with being a teacher, you have your teacher hat. Is it different, or do you switch and transition hats from when you teach your kids and when you're teaching your kids at school, or how you interact with your kids versus the kids at school? I know actually 7th, 8th grade, middle school is that tough age. Do you find yourself, I was always curious of this with teachers, do you have to switch, or do you speak to your kids differently, or do you find yourself putting on a teacher hat when you're talking to your kids for certain things?
Yeah. It falls into this like middle area, because no, I used to be different, but that's also when I showed up in the world with no purpose. And that's what left me on a couch with a panic attack over a TV show, because I woke up and I just went. I was dad here, I was teacher there, I was 2 different people. I was never Clay Smeltzer. I was just who I needed to be in the area I was, so that I could please those people. And that's what was giving to everybody else and nothing for myself. I show up as Clay Smeltzer. So who is Clay? And I love this answer. Like, hey, who are you? Most of the time we're going to be like, well, I'm a teacher. No. I used to say that. Here's who Clay Smeltzer is. I'm a man who owns his shit, loves his story, lives with purpose every day. I just happen to do that as a man, a husband, a father. I do that as a teacher. I do that as a fitness coach. I do that as a baseball coach. I do that walking in Walmart. Everywhere I go, I'm the same person. I own my shit. I love my story. I live with purpose. I help other people do that. So I act like that in my classroom. The issue I have is that I have to limit myself to what would actually benefit students because of the system that I work in. At home, there's no limitations because it's mine. So there's where it's like I'm in this middle area. So I don't go as hard on students as I do my own kids. And my own kids, there's times I need to go hard. Like we went hard the other day with Callie and Kale. And I don't mean like this. I meant, hey, this is a tough conversation. We need to have it. You're going to sit here and do this. Well, I can't do that at school because one, I have to go through all this curriculum and all this, not enough time. But two, then there's not a support with admin to do the right thing for students. It's a whole system, and I don't know what your thoughts are on education, but I'm going to say as an educator, most educators are probably 98% of the educators are like, hey, shit ain't working. So like it doesn't. So we have this system that's just trying to peg everybody into the same hole, and everybody's not. Everybody's different. And there's so many things like kids I have that if I was able to do what I'm good at and with like what my kids have at home, they'd be a totally different kid. But I can't because I just got to teach them. I have to teach them these things in 120 days. I have 130 days, but I have to teach them in this time frame, this stuff because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's where it's like, so I'm stuck in a system that doesn't necessarily benefit kids. And the problem is, I'm just going to go in my education soapbox. The problem is 98% of the world knows it, or the United States knows it. The 2% who don't know it are the administrators and politicians who made the decision, who their ego's too big to say, hey, we're wrong and it's not working. So there's my educational plug.
I mean, I do agree with you, and not to get into like a touchy subject, but I do agree with you in that sense. I did help actually build basically a athletic charter school. So we focused on basically basketball players, actually in middle school as well. I was, basically helped build out the strength and conditioning program for the kids. Good. So they literally were in the classroom, and it wasn't even out of school. We did it actually in a gym, in the subsection of the gym. But there was, the kids would come in, they would do their schoolwork, and all that stuff. And then afterwards, they basically had basketball and they had strength and conditioning. And it was for, basically 2 to 3 hours in total. And that was every single day. But if they didn't get their schoolwork done, like they weren't allowed to play basketball. They weren't allowed to come strength condition and stuff. And I think that was one of my first like realizations of like, there's definitely different ways and better ways to teach kids. I mean,
think about how engaged they were. You know what I mean? I'm sitting here going, man, I'm so excited about that. Like, hopefully that's continuing too. But like, I'm so excited about that because think about the engagement. What we do is like, and this is anybody, professionally or personally. Will you do something, put the time, energy, effort, and usually money into something that you don't find valuable and usable? No, you ain't going to do it. So we have all these kids going to school that don't find usability and value in what they're learning. I teach 110 new topics. Out of those 110, what are they actually going to use in life? Probably like 20 of them. So our kids are coming like, hey, when am I ever going to use this? And I'm like, you're not. Like, it's just not. Like, I'm the only teacher who's like, no, you're not going to use this, but we need to learn it now. Let's do it. It's on your quit. Like, okay, cool. Let's do it. Let's get over with. Let's move forward. But here are the things that you are going to use. But they don't find that in our educational system today. Students don't find value and usability of the information that they're learning. If they did, like you taught, like you had the system you have, think about the level of work they put into their schoolwork. Maybe they didn't need it or won't use it. Like, you don't need to know George Washington wood tooth or whatever. Like, okay, cool, that's awesome to know, but you don't necessarily need it. Okay, but what we look at, they probably put more effort into that because they had this other stuff. And if they didn't complete that. So what's the big goal? The big goal is, hey, you need to make sure you get your stuff done. You take care of yourself first so that you can do the things that you've earned. Right. That's the goal. And that's where it's like, man, that is exciting. And that's what we need to switch to. And it's an easy switch. It's just getting people, and I'm going to relate this back to parents as well. It's just getting people who've made the decision to say, listen, okay, we made a bad decision. Like, what we're doing isn't working. So let's change. Parents, how many times do parents do that? they'll stick, no, this is right, this is right, this is right. But they're like, well, all right, is it actually right? Like your ego gets in the way of you being the best parent because you're unwilling to say, no, I need help. No, I didn't do this right. Yes, I can make some adjustments, things like that. So we don't want to say, and I think we talked about it a little bit before, is we don't want to say we were wrong. Because when we were wrong, I have to admit that we were wrong. And my ego can't handle that. But what we need to understand is when we admit those things that we did wrong, but we also celebrate those things we did right, we're collecting wins in both areas. So that's why being an athlete growing up, like I understood, like I learned a lot from losses, but I probably learned more from wins because, hey, I'm winning. This is what we're going to keep doing. Like losses, oh man, what do we do? How do we? Okay, cool. Let's make those adjustments. But you learn from both. It's not. I get better from one of them or the other. No, you learn from both of those. But having the ego to say, yeah, I'm not at the right spot I need to be. Here's what I need to adjust. Our egos have overtaken our ability to be aware and take action on that awareness.
No, I 100% agree with that. And I think it also kind of like touches into like what Jocko Willings talks about in Extreme Ownership, in the sense of being able to admit either you were wrong.
The book's back. I was looking back here because it's right back there somewhere.
Oh yeah, like
it's on my bookshelf
somewhere. Yeah, like he talks about, in the sense of not just admitting that you're wrong, but taking ownership of good or bad outcomes. And so even like with like my team and like my employees and stuff, it's one of those things where if they didn't do something or do it right or whatever the case is, it's easy just to put that blame on them, like you didn't do this. But if you have that humility, and people think of humility as a bad thing, but it is actually a strength, being able to reassess yourself and know that you don't know everything or don't do everything right all the time, you can improve yourself. But letting them know like, hey, maybe I didn't explain this well enough to you. That's my fault. Yeah. And by doing stuff like that and then basically explaining it to them again, then all of a sudden you'll notice, just like that E plus R equals O, the outcome is they start to tend to take more responsibility for other things. Like, no, you actually did explain it well. I just messed up, or I was half-assing it, or whatever the case is. Yep. And that starts to, again, have other outcomes on other people's lives and so forth. So I think that is a huge thing that, people do need to know, is being able to look at yourself and, being willing to admit when you're wrong, if you're wrong, admit, take responsibility for things and not shift blame.
Yeah. We're in a fighting society. I'm trying to prove everything's right that you say, like, and that's where it too comes into some like beliefs. We go to beliefs, politically, educationally, spiritually, whatever. We got parenting styles, whatever. Like, you believe what you believe, and you make the choices what you feel best. Ultimately, if somebody comes in and say, "Hey, Clay, I think what you do is dumb," I'm like, "Cool. Like, I appreciate. What are your thoughts? What would you do?" Okay, I would do this. Okay, cool. Like, I appreciate your response because you and your thoughts, but those aren't my thoughts. I like what you said here. Maybe I'll look at adjusting that. But we don't have to argue and try to prove that we're right. And that's what we do. And that's why we have issues with parenting. Sometimes we can't even talk about a topic like, hey, should you discipline your kid or not? What about spanking? Like, does that work? Or should you use it or not? And some people go off the rail. And I'm like, okay, so if you choose this or choose that, that's your choice, not mine. Okay, here's what I believe. Here's what you believe. You can take it to any realm. Education, like, there's, again, for me, like, I'm in the educational system. Here's my beliefs. So other people have different. And that's where it's like, okay, cool. We got to celebrate those differences instead of sitting here and trying to argue about those differences, because the more we argue, the more we go internal to say, hey, I'm not willing to say I'm wrong. Or I'm not willing to say, hey, maybe I should look at this a little bit different, or see somebody else's perspective, not even change, but just be able to be like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. All right, cool. I don't agree with it still, but I understand where you're coming from. That's a pretty cool way to think about it.
No, and being able to do that also allows you to grow and be able to shift your own mindset. And like, I think that's a key point too, is in society, we do always look to argue the fact that we are right and you are wrong, when in any given area, it's not black and white. 99% of the time, it's not black and white, right? It's gray, right?
Yeah.
So
a lot of gray.
yeah. So like your points are your points, my points are my points. But by being able to listen to your points, like you just said, like thank you so much for, telling me about that. I'm going to keep doing, I think my way is working for here. But what you said about this, actually, I do like that. And I will start to try to change that one aspect, right? So being able to listen to other people's sides in politics or whatever, like it doesn't always have to be A or B, right?
Yeah.
It could be an A-B blend to make the actual best journey for yourself. But you have to be able to, have that humility again from taking from what other people are saying, perspectives and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. And that goes back to what you originally said here at the beginning about talking about, hey, it's about people's stories, people's journeys. And that's what I love hearing, people's stories and journeys, is because like, I don't know what's going to come out. I don't know what yours is. So therefore, when I learn that, I'd be like, I wouldn't have made that decision, but okay, cool. Like we get to learn new ways to appreciate life, to deal with life, to build some new skills. And sometimes those stories are like, oh man, I wish I would have done that. Sometimes you're like, oh, I can't believe you did that. But then all the whole mix is, okay, cool. What can I take to better me, to prioritize me so that I'm the best me? Because when I'm the best me, I'm better for everybody else and especially my family. And that's the key, man. And that's why I love people's stories is you learn so much from those. And I just want to come back on that because at the beginning, that's what this is all about. That's why you do podcasts. Is so that occurs. And some people might listen to this and be like, oh, there's some cool things that Devin and Clay said. All right, cool. Yeah, I'm going to try. Some people are like, well, that was the dumbest thing I ever heard. I'm like, okay, either way is cool because it's your life and it all comes back to you.
Right. And with podcasts, with audiobooks, with books, with anything, like the way I look at it is you're not listening to it or reading it to follow it as a script, right?
Yeah.
When you're listening to people's journeys and you're listening to, podcasts or audiobooks or reading books, you're looking for the nuggets. You're looking for the little key takeaways that you can use or basically utilize to adjust your journey, adjust, your perspective. And that, I might read a book and get one key takeaway, but if I can get one key takeaway from that, and something I can utilize that I just grew, that book just is an improvement for me, right? And I think that one of the things when you're talking about, you said basically like, I don't agree with what you did there or why you did this. The one thing I think that people kind of stop is they stop there, right?
Yep.
They hear what you did, they hear what your thought is, and they're like, I disagree, right? Yep. Instead of taking it a level further and being like, I don't agree with that. Why are you thinking that? Or what made you decide to do that or think that way? And then all of a sudden, I can understand a little bit more of why that happened or why you're thinking that. And now we can discuss that, right? And that's going to be really the solution to a lot of people's debates.
And it's an amazing conversation because you're like, oh, okay, that's a perspective. I put a post out the other day that said, basically, everything in your life is your fault. And I was like, all right, what's your thoughts? And it was like, beep, 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 beep. What I didn't realize is how much people focused on the word fault. And they're like, well, why'd you word it so negatively? I'm like, I don't think I did, from my perspective, and that was a lot of them. Like, oh man, I would say it this way instead of using the word fault. The word fault is really kind of negative, like you did something bad. I'm like, okay, I can see that perspective. For me, growing up in where I grew up and with my family and the experiences I had, when I say, hey, my life is my fault, that's good and bad. Like fault is just another word for my choices was my responsibility. So to me, it didn't come. I wasn't negative. Like, and the quote came from somewhere else. It's just quotes, and I love to do that, but to get people's thoughts on that. But I was like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. Like, I still don't see it as negative, but it's an interesting perspective that how many people. And my wife said it too. She's like, did you see your post? Like, other people. She's like, what did you think about that? And I was like, yeah, I didn't think fault was a bad word. She's like, no, neither did I. I was like, it's kind of neat just to kind of see how many people were like, yeah, I wouldn't use the word fault. That's bad. And I'm like, okay, cool. But from there, I'm not changing that thought process of me, but other people's perspective, I understand that. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's actually a pretty cool perspective that you have about that. And I was like, oh, that's neat. Now, in the future, depending on what I'm using it for, or using it at, I might not use that because I'm like, oh, that conversation we had, they're like, oh, this is more of a negative tone to it when it comes to something based upon what I want. So if I'm like writing a goal or something like that, I probably don't want to use the word fault because it might have a negative connotation to it. And that's where it's like, oh, okay, cool. Without that conversation or without that different perspective, I've been like, all right, cool, this is a good word to use. But subconsciously, it might not be the best word to use depending on the situation.
No, that's huge. Actually, I heard something to kind of go along with that the other day from Tony Robbins. He said, people don't experience life. People experience the life that they focus on, right? So meaning like, if you focus and you're looking for the negative things, like the word fault or, anything that has a negative connotation, you're going to be focusing on that. And that's what your life and your perspective is going to be, because life is only through the perspective of the viewer, right? Life isn't life, right?
Yeah.
So your life and your reality is different than my reality because it's what we focus on, what we intake, and what's filling our cups. So I think that's huge. What I want to ask you is, when typically at the end of the podcast, I like to ask this hypothetical question.
Nice.
So let's say all your social media platforms, are gone. It's your last day on earth and you aren't, everything's going with you, right? What is one thing that you would like to leave, so that basically people would remember you by, and one piece of it, basically advice that you could give that would be your one hitter essentially?
For me, own your shit. That's it. Like, just own it. It's your life. So, and the thing is too, like when I think about that situation, okay, it's my last day on earth. I'm spending it with my family, like my people. Like, that's it. I'm just going to love on them. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to own my shit, love my story, live with purpose. I'm going to go out guns blazing, like leave it all in the field. That's my mentality is because here's the thing. In that day, I know that all the days prior, I left it on the field. So in that day, if that's my last, I want to just have that warmth and that love from everybody else, the ones that mean the most to me, because those are the ones that are going to keep my message going. I don't know if you listen to Macklemore at all. Love his stuff. But in the song Glorious, he says, you die twice. The first time is when they bury in your grave, and the second time is the last time that somebody mentions your name. Because the work that we do on this earth and how we pour out, how we live as Clay Smeltzer. I know how I live as Clay Smeltzer now. My kids don't have to worry. And here's the thing too, is I don't want to get morbid here, but like I might die today, but here's what I know. And we have 50-50 custody of my kids. So my kids aren't with us this weekend. And our oldest daughter is at college. But I know that if today we drove somewhere and we died in a car crash, I already know my kids know that today my wife and I left it all in the field. We left nothing behind because of how we show up every single day. We talked about legacy is a big word. One of the guys I know, Tyler Harris, he's like, Clay, think about legacy as this. It's not what you leave behind. It's what you leave right now, because what you leave right now shows everybody what you're going to have then. And that's it's for me. It's I know how I live and how I show up every day. I leave it on the field. So that today was my last day, and like I died walking up these steps from my basement. Like I know my wife knows I left it all in the field right here, and because that's just how we live. And so I'm going to go out going, all right, cool.
Wow. I mean,
I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I'm going to answer your question.
No, I mean, wow, that's powerful. No, that definitely answered the question. Where can people connect with you? What's the best place to connect with you?
Facebook. You can connect with me on Facebook. Just type in Clay Smeltzer. Same thing on Instagram, Clay Smeltzer, and LinkedIn. I do have a Facebook group, Metabolism Secrets for Parents Over 30. And really, that's a parenting group to ask the questions, have the conversations that parents need to have. Yes, it says metabolism. Yes, those, but it's really a community of parents. And our goal is to reach 1,000 parents. We're about halfway there right now. And it's awesome just to have some of those conversations and deep conversations and light conversations. But there's no blueprint for this parenting thing. And we got to take care of ourselves first so that we can be better for our families. So those are the places that you can connect and join our community.
That's awesome. And honestly, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know you got clients and stuff to deal with. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. And guys, like always, please make sure you leave a review and share this with a friend, share this with another busy parent or someone else that just needs that little push to help them on their personal journey, right? If you took something away from this, as a thank you to us, please make sure you give it to someone else and continue to let your cup overflow into others. So thank you so much, Clay.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Devin.
All right, guys, until next time.